All right, let's get right into it. Peter Tragos is back with us to talk week 6 of the Karen Reed trial. He is lawyer, based in Tampa. He, like myself, has been following this case very closely, and we've been doing this back and forth now for a few weeks, and it's been great to get your input. As we speak now, the 38th witness is on the stand for the prosecution. That is Dr. Judson Welcher. He's a biomechanical engineer. Brennan talked about science and data in his opening, that was crucial to his case. And the jury's getting a lot of that from Dr. Welcher at a cost of $400,000 to taxpayers. Good investment, do you think, for the Norfolk DA's office?
I mean, from the Norfolk DA's office, maybe, but I don't know how many of the citizens would agree with that. And, in my type of cases, civil, car accident, truck accident cases where everybody's spending a lot of money, usually it doesn't hit as hard. But when you're talking about those are my dollars, it depends on how the jury's looking at it. Because especially when they've heard a little bit about Trooper Paul and that he exists. And I would be wondering, why didn't we just use that guy again? Why do we have to go out and spend $400,000?
Let's remind everyone about Trooper Paul. Trooper Joseph Paul works for the Massachusetts State Police. His job is accident reconstruction. He testified in the first trial, but I think the jury in the first trial had a difficult time sort of understanding Trooper Paul's analysis. I think he struggled to articulate his findings. What I find sort of interesting, though, is Dr. Welcher's conclusions are sort of similar about the sideswipe. It's sort of the same data or the same findings, correct? That Trooper Paul tried to get out last time?
Yeah, I think they are similar. Some of the differences is very specifically with Dr. Welcher. He will not answer something he doesn't feel like he has the answer to or can back up. He may say there are all these possibilities. Trooper Paul came up with this pirouette and things that, memes were created about after the first trial that just didn't make a lot of sense. And Welcher may say something like, that's possible, but we don't know how he ended up where he ended up. We don't know when the car started backing up. We don't know when the car ended. But the main point of Dr. Welcher was to show, look, here's a picture or a video of how the taillight could hit somebody in the elbow part of the arm, just like where the injuries are on John O'Keefe. He simplified it, tried to give a picture to the jury where they're like, oh, that makes sense. And, I think unless he's getting more into the details, that could be problematic. But generally speaking, as a top-down view, I think he gave them at least a picture of what it could have looked like.
And Dr. Welcher is a professional witness. He is not afraid to clap back. And he did that a few times when Alessi was questioning him, sort of adding extra information. Well, Alessi will ask him a question and he'll add, well, of course, you had the DNA found on the taillight and other things. And obviously that's done by design. He knows he's talking to the jury.
Absolutely. And, from a criminal defense attorney's perspective, cross-examining a witness like this can be really difficult. He's a smart witness. He's a professional witness. He does this. I do think sometimes it can get you into trouble. And some jurors may hate the demeanor of Dr. Welcher, may see it as condescending or evasive, or he said very specifically he doesn't have a dog in the fight. It certainly felt like he did during cross-examination. So, I mean, I think that can go both ways, right? You can really have a witness pushing for you if you're the Commonwealth, but it can turn off some jurors. And at this point of the trial, most jurors probably have a lean as to whether or not they think Karen Reed committed this crime, and they're probably going to see it that way, right? If they think she did it, they're going to think, wow, Welcher's great. Why is Alessi being such a bully or such a jerk to him? If they think Karen Reed's innocent or this investigation was either a joke or a conspiracy or a cover-up of some sort, they might hate Dr. Welcher, and his demeanor may feed into that.
So he buys a 2021 Lexus identical to Karen Reed's. I checked, like the blue book on that 2021 is that's like the top of the line, the LX 570, 60 grand. Is that common in accident reconstruction to go out and buy an identical vehicle?
So common. I don't know if I would call it common. All these cases are kind of specific, right? You really need to do what's necessary for the case. In a civil case, I've seen that happen, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happening. I haven't seen it a lot in criminal cases. There's not a lot of cases like this, I got to be honest, about did this even come from a car? It's just such an unusual question. Usually that's so obvious. It may be who's at fault. The black box data to determine, was somebody speeding when they went through the green light? Did somebody run a red light? Where did it hit on the car? Could that collision cause enough force to create the injury or cause the injury that's being complained of in this case? Those are the more common questions. Who's at fault? Whose car was where when the collision occurred? Not, did a car cause this injury? That's kind of wild to think like, is this where the car came into contact with skin? And if so, how did the taillight explode? How did the scratches get there? How did he end up with a skull fracture? Those are the questions in this case.
Yeah, and speaking of the black box, or I think it's also called the event data recorder. So sort of the crux of Dr. Welch's testimony is that the black box in Karen Reed's car shows that she made this 3-point turn. 8 minutes later, the car is put in reverse. The tires spin, accelerate something like 84 feet backwards, reaching a speed of up to 24 miles an hour. And that's when he says this collision happens. And of course, then he tries to line that up with the last movements on John O'Keefe's iPhone. It's, a lot to try to take in, right? That's so many different parameters. Jury getting that?
So I actually like the way that you set it out, and I feel like I can follow and track with that. But then Dr. Welcher, when Alessi asked him that question, was like, I never said that. What are you talking about? I never said that the collision happened at 20 miles an hour going backwards. Because again, they're saying all these things, but he's not specifically saying that because he knows the data doesn't actually prove that to a reasonable degree of medical certainty or scientific certainty or engineering certainty, whatever you want to use. So instead, they're creating all these data points, and Hank Brennan, in closing argument, is going to have to be the one to put all those together. But I thought that when Alessi asked that question, it was kind of simple. Like, okay, you say the collision occurred at 20 miles an hour when she was in reverse. He's like, I never said that. Because I was thinking about it exactly like you said, that's the Commonwealth's theory. And that was just kind of confusing to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all piecemeal, right? And that's what I guess following trials, that when I first started watching criminal trials, I had to learn that it doesn't come out in that there are a number of restrictions about how testimony can come in, and it has to be sort of layered, and that's the process. And we're on to day 3 with Dr. Welcher. So his theory is that it was a side swipe or clip. He uses that video, which included, the paint transfer. Mm-hmm. I thought that was fairly effective for at least what, trying to give a visual to the jury. And is that something that you see? Is that revolutionary in this space, or is that just, what you do when you have a case of this magnitude?
I've seen people making fun of it, and I get it, finger painting, whatever. But in reality, I would agree with you. I think it paints a picture of at least how this is possible, where the light would have touched the arm in order to be in the perfect spot that we see scratches on John O'Keefe's arm. I'm still not sure how the taillight made those scratches, right? We still have questions, but at least, just like you said, when you called it piecemeal, I would call it building on top of each other, right? Foundational witness, you have a block, you put a building block on top, and that's how you build the house. If you're puzzle pieces, right, and you're putting together the puzzle pieces, if you're the Commonwealth, sometimes because of the rules of evidence and because one witness can testify about something, a different witness can testify about something else, and you can put it all together. And I do think that part of that exercise or test or whatever he wants to call it was effective. I thought other parts that he just decided not to test, not to talk about, they continue to ignore the issues on the Commonwealth side. So every point they get, if a juror is remembering the rest of the trial and the other questions they have, sometimes they come away with more questions than answers.
Explain your understanding of the wounds on John O'Keefe's arms, and tell me if I'm getting this right, because I believe this is what Trooper Paul said as well. Is the Commonwealth is alleging, or Welcher is alleging, that the arm gets clipped by the taillight, it cracks, and then it breaks, and it creates these shards, and then the shards are what inflict the wounds on the hand. Am I understanding that that's their theory?
So that's a problem, right? The fact that you've watched both trials and we are 22 days into this trial and you don't know what the theory is. And I will say, neither do I, right? It, based on logic and common sense, you would think it shatters the taillight into 50 pieces. And either I would think it's more common that the piece of the taillight left over connected to the car would have caused those scratches because there's not big pieces of plastic sticking out of his arm, right? We can talk about the shards and the debris in his clothes or whatever, and that's fine. I think that's good evidence for the Commonwealth if the jury buys it based on the evidence collection. But to make those kind of scratches or gashes on his arm, it can't be the pieces flying in the air because they're not touching his arm anymore once it explodes. So to me, that is a little bit confusing as to, and that's a question the Commonwealth just has not answered yet through a medical examiner and now through a biomedical and biomechanical engineer, Dr. Welcher. He is not explaining to us. He's just saying the scratches are in the same location as the blue paint. That's as deep as he has gotten. He has not said exactly how. We heard about a metal piece sticking out. Well, was there
Yeah.
30 metal pieces sticking out to make all those scratches? I don't get it. I don't see how there's proof that those scratches would have occurred. And he used an example case of how you don't have to break bones when you get hit going 25 to 30 miles an hour. But the injuries that guy sustained, wow, that's what you expect from a car accident. Broken ribs, bruises, abrasions all over, and a huge laceration on his arm. That's what I would expect somebody getting hit going 25 to 30 miles an hour.
And Brennan actually asked that question. He said, is it uncommon in sideswipe, and I have it here, sideswipe
Yeah.
accidents to see no lower body injuries or broken bones? And Walter said, no, it's not uncommon. But I think that doesn't jive with some of the other testimony that we heard from the ME, Dr. Scorty Bello, who said, no, due to the lack of injuries to the lower body, that's why I can't conclude this was a car strike.
It makes no sense. Like
Right.
that's something that feels like illogical. And if I'm on a jury, they don't throw their common sense away, they don't throw their logic away. That makes no sense. And you even just showed us a test case that you said is good for you. And we see abrasions and bruises all over the lower extremities, buttocks, lower back, legs. That's exactly what I would expect from a car hitting a pedestrian at 25 miles an hour.
So Alessi got into the weeds in his cross. He really did. And dealing with force and mass and acceleration. And I wondered at times if the jury was hanging on to every word of that.
Yeah, so he's obviously a smart guy, right? Bob
Yeah, he
Alessi is
is.
much smarter than me. And I usually do not like to get into the laws of physics with biomechanical engineers. Usually I try to make it a little bit simpler to ask the questions that are important, like, how did this taillight explode? Did you not do that test? You said 8 miles an hour. Where's the 8 miles an hour test? Oh, you didn't want to, devalue the car you're going to sell and give the money back to the Commonwealth for. So whatever his answer is, you can help. And that's just kind of logical and simple. He's kind of taken a different route, which I think can absolutely be effective if you can catch this witness in some problems and some things that, by the laws of physics don't make sense. But I think you have to be careful because unless he does ask some longer questions, some compound questions. Sometimes he makes a statement or testifies to something before he asks a question. And when you ask questions like that, you give a witness like this the opportunity to pick any one part of your question and say, I have a problem with that. And now they're not even answering your question. So I think to tighten it up, and we're already seeing this morning that I think Alessi is trying to control this witness a little bit more and say, no, we're not going to do what we did yesterday. You're not going to talk for 15
Yep.
minutes. We're not having a conversation. I'm asking questions and you're giving answers.
Alessi's an interesting guy. So, I speak to him, now and then. He doesn't sleep. Like he's essentially rarely sleeps. He works out. I think his workout schedule is an hour and a half every other day. And he eats like the most insane like health food diet in the world. Like he's such an interesting character in all this, and I've actually enjoyed my
That
conversations with him because he's funny, he's self-deprecating.
you know what that makes me think? That doesn't surprise me at all. That to me, when I hear you say that, I think discipline, I think mental toughness. I think you're never ever going to be in a position that you don't feel like you can figure your way out of it, and that's exactly the vibe I get from him. So while that is kind of shocking to hear that type of a regiment, it's not that surprising with the way that I see him work. That's exactly what I would expect. And with every lawyer, well, I'll just say with good lawyers, this still happens where you get into the weeds. Some cross examination can be clunky. You have a difficult witness. It's easy for us to sit here and talk about it and Monday morning quarterback it back it from a chair. There's a million things going on in this very long and difficult trial. So it doesn't mean somebody's a bad lawyer because they had a bad hour questioning a witness. You've got your time. And what I appreciate about him, a good lawyer, a confident lawyer, competent lawyer, he's not going to let the judge rush him with this witness. Judge Canoni was like, hey, how much longer do you think? Can we please get done with this witness tomorrow? He's like, Judge, this is potentially the most important witness. I got to get what I got to get out of him. He didn't say this, but also the witness isn't making it easy on me. He's not making it go any quicker. So I'm going to take my time and get everything I need to. And you have to stick to your guns like that if you're a lawyer.
During some of that more technical testimony yesterday or cross-examination yesterday, I did see Karen Reed call Alessi over. I don't think the camera
Yes,
picked it up, and she
I saw it.
whispered, oh, you did? Okay, it did pick
Yes.
it up. And she was talking in his ear, and you just wonder, like, what is she saying? Like, obviously, I think, as we've discussed many times before, I think she's plays a massive role in what happens in that courtroom. And you got to wonder if she was giving him, saying, "Hey, hit this point or go this direction." But it was something that was very noticeable to me.
It's telling to me that it's happening with this witness. If it was Jen McCabe or Carrie Roberts, where Karen Reed was there and she can say that didn't happen or they didn't say this. I've had, every client tells me that, like, that's not true. That's not how it happened. I didn't say that. They'll whisper that into my ear, but not usually with the experts, right? With the math, with explain to me how this happened, how fast we have been going, use this test case, crash dummy. Why didn't you do this test? It's more uncommon for a client unless they're in that field, right? We've represented doctors, we've represented lawyers, people that are in certain fields that would talk about those things. But to me, that tells me she is, I think it was your interview that she said, I'm intimately involved in this. I'm going through discovery. I'm giving them ideas. We're dividing and conquering. And to me, that says she's in the weeds of the actual technicalities in this trial, not just the fact witnesses and the lay witnesses.
Yeah, she was an equity analyst prior
Yes.
to all of this happening. And that is not that's a job that requires smarts, and it's a job that is not easy to get, especially for a firm like Fidelity, where you have some, especially in Boston, with so many people here who are smart, and especially in the finance field. Prior to Dr. Welcher, we saw Dr. Isaac Wolf. He was the Miami neurosurgeon. Dude was like right out of central casting. Like, you
My
could
dad
tell, like,
said the
I
same thing.
I want that guy operating on me.
Yeah.
He was smooth. He just came in, and Alessi I think it was Alessi who made a good point. He's like, well, yeah, this information is great, but you're not a forensic examiner. You're not a medical examiner. But his conclusion was that, you know, John O'Keefe's would have been knocked unconscious. And he said the only way he could have gotten the injuries that he did was from falling backwards. It would have knocked him unconscious and it would not have killed him instantly. His testimony, I don't know if you had a chance to see that. Your thoughts on Dr. Isaac Wolf?
Yeah. I thought he was incredibly credible. I thought there was a lot of things the defense can use, like comparing him to Shannon Burgess, right? Right after the other. What an educational difference.
Yeah.
What an expert difference. I thought there's really no holes to be poked in what he said. So from my perspective, I think the defense can just use what he said, right? That can be foundational. That can be something they can build on with their ME. If there are going to be disagreements, I thought the defense put him in a box, right? In the box that he is the expert in, which is prior to death and with treatment and surgery. We don't have any of that here. This is postmortem. And the defense is going to call experts in that field. Additionally, he came out on direct and said, oh, yeah, in Minnesota, we have snow and drunk people all the time. They slip and fall and hit the back of their head. This is the very common injury when it comes to slipping and falling and hitting the back of your head. I would assume the defense is going to use that in the future as well. So with a witness like this, unless he was very in and out quick, he was very careful. That's exactly how you handle a witness like this.
One of his roles, in my understanding, right, is to get you to murder too, especially if in closing Hank Brennan says that Karen Reed went back to the scene or was aware that a collision happened. That gives you, well, would John O'Keefe still be alive today? Correct?
I don't know, man. Your guess is as good as mine as to what they think proves murder two in this case. The voicemails disprove it, in my
No,
opinion.
absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, from my perspective, if I'm a jury senior, I've already decided this was not intentional. I'm trying to figure out if she accidentally hit him and went home. That's just where I'm at, to be honest. I don't know how they're going to prove. Aruba is certainly not going to prove to me murder two, something that happened days or weeks before that she picks now to kill him with her car, or to do something rash or do something dangerous. From my perspective, I think that ship has sailed on murder two. I could be wrong. We'll see what the jury thinks, but I think most of the jury is trying to figure out, did she hit him and not know it and leave him there to die, or kill him instantly? Is there some count two version of count two that they can convict on?
Yeah, it is rare that I ever talk to anybody about this case where they feel that it's intentional if it happened. That is the
Yeah.
one thing that I think, regardless of where you fall, that the majority of people agree that seems to be an uphill battle that the prosecution, regardless of what they put out there and how they present their case, that they'll ever get to. But, we'll know in what, 3 weeks or so. We are kind of winding down because Karen Reed had said that Welcher is the last witness. Obviously, we don't know for sure until we actually see Hank Brennan say him saying that the prosecution is resting. Defense gets the case. They call their witnesses. One of the filings that we saw this week is a bunch of names. The defense added supplemental witnesses. And my understanding is those are people who are on Proctor's text and they're there to authenticate. So does that mean that they actually go onto the stand, or did they just like sign some affidavit to say that, yes, former Trooper Proctor texted me this, or I was a part of this text chain? What is that? How does that work?
So it depends on the jurisdiction. I actually don't know how it is in Massachusetts. There are certain things that if it's a public record and you get certain affidavits signed and documents signed, you wouldn't have to call them. There are other cases where both sides will agree you don't have to call records custodians. I don't think we've seen records custodians in this case to bring in records. So I don't know if those have been waived or if Hank Brennan has waived other ones but won't waive these. They may have to call him to the stand. So I don't know the answer to that. There are different ways of dealing with it to authenticate these before they can come in. But I do think it's another option for the defense to get into these texts than calling Trooper Proctor, or former Trooper Proctor, which we'll see. I think what the defense is going to do outside their experts, your guess is as good as mine at this point.
Why wouldn't you call Trooper Proctor? That just seems like I don't understand where that could be a negative for the defense.
So, and I've heard people saying, oh, Hank Brennan's baiting them into calling him. It's like maybe with, Higgins or the Alberts or McCabe's or something like that, Brennan has some plan. I do not see how Trooper Proctor is good for the Commonwealth. I think it is so obvious if they don't call him and the defense does, that so much good can come for the defense. The only negative is if the jury somehow likes Trooper Proctor or they feel bad for him, or just you see the person sitting in the chair there and he becomes humanized and you don't want to hate him. And right now he's this figment or like the boogeyman.
Right, the
And it's
boogeyman, yeah.
easier to hate the boogeyman than it is to see a man with a family sitting there on the stand telling you this ruined his life, basically. I don't know. Is the judge going to be able to let the Commonwealth get into that? Who knows?
All right. Peter Tragos at Lawyer Thank you so much for another great recap of week 6. Hopefully we'll talk to you again week 7, and always appreciate the time, man.
Absolutely, man. Good to talk to you.
All right, take care.